Welcome to this video. This time we're going to continue with the CEH version 13 preparation exam series that we've been covering, and this time we're going to go over the vulnerabilities analysis module, which happens to be module number 5. And according to the official documentation, what they expect you to know is learn how to identify security loopholes in a target organization's network, communication infrastructure, and end systems. So that is the general concept of what they would like you to know for vulnerability analysis. If you follow my channel, you know that I have created multiple videos on different vulnerability analysis tools and processes. I've created videos on Nessus, OpenVAS, Qualys, OWASP, Metasploit, Nmap, and Sniper and Wireshark, just to mention some of them. I don't remember if I have done something on Nikto yet or Retina, but those are tools. These are the tools that you have to be familiar with, even if you haven't used them in real life. You have to be familiar with what the tool does and what the purpose of the tool is. When it comes to vulnerability analysis, I'm going to give you another definition that it refers to the process of systematically, and that's something that you have to keep in mind, systematically identifying, evaluating, and prioritizing security vulnerabilities. And again, security vulnerabilities are not only for the infrastructure and for systems, they could also be part of applications. And I've mentioned something about web application securities, and I've created a couple of videos for that. Now, again, the purpose of vulnerabilities is identification, validation, prioritization, and remediation. I had a hard time saying that word, prioritization and remediations. And that's what you have to keep in mind. And these are some of the tools you're going to be able to use to perform those specific tasks. Now, I have to tell you that for your exam, you have to be familiar with what the tool does, or what do these tools do, right? You have to know what Nessus is used for, what type of vulnerabilities you're going to be able to detect with Nessus. And it's going to scan for vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, and outdated software. The same for OpenVAS, which is an open source. When it comes to Nessus has the pro version and it has the community version. But usually OpenVAS is known as open source, even though you have Nessus that also has a community version. So you may get a questions as of which of these is an open source vulnerability assessment solution, and in this case, you have to choose OpenVAS if that's one of your options. Then we have Nikto for web apps, Qualys for infrastructure, and they can also do application scanning burp, 100% application. OWASP is 100% application. Metasploit is a framework that is going to allow you to perform many different functions. And I would say that you also have to know what Wireshark is going to do. Wireshark in reality is not going to do any vulnerability assessment because it's just going to capture traffic, but you can use that information to identify any potential vulnerabilities, so you can make a case for that, even though Wireshark is not something known for vulnerability assessment. And then we have Nmap. You have to know Nmap in and out. I mean, if you want to do good on your test and even good on your career as a cybersecurity professional, you have to be familiar with Nmap. So these are the tools that I believe you should be familiar with to have a good shot at the exam. So let me come over here, and there's a couple of things that I want to mention. When it comes to vulnerability management, there's another concept that you need to have clear, and that is authenticated and unauthenticated scans. And let me come here for 1 second, and I'm going to configure this. And this is a test that I ran on my test network, And as you can see right here, this is Nessus Essentials, and with Nessus you're going to have the options, and the same thing with any real vulnerability assessment solution. You're going to be able to perform, like unauthenticated scans, meaning that the scanned agent is not going to have the credentials of the target. So it's just going to see from the outside, and it's going to provide information. And even then, you're going to be able to collect a lot of information, right? A lot of vulnerabilities or misconfigurations. But there is a more, there's a deeper type of a scan that you can perform, and that is an authenticated scan. And for authenticated scan, you're going to provide the credentials. And that type of scan is going to be able to go deeper into the analysis for potential vulnerabilities and misconfigurations on your systems. Obviously, not all tools listed here, you're going to be able to do that, right? Like with Sniper, you're not going to be able to do authenticated. If you use the community edition from the command line, I believe with Nessus, OpenVAS, you're going to be able to do that. Nikto is web app. I don't think you're going to be able to do that. So just keep that in mind for your exam. You have to know, and even again for your career, you have to know what an authenticated versus unauthenticated network scan is when it comes to vulnerability management. So let's go here. Let me just show you one more thing. So just keep that in mind. These are some of the common tools. Nikto, if you want to perform web application scans, this is an example of how to run it. And again, this is one of my test sites. I have many sites that I do testing on. And then we also have Nmap. Again, as I mentioned before, Nmap is a network scanner for scanners, but there is a script that you're going to be able to perform vulnerabilities, and that is vuln, right? So this is something that you need to know for your exam and something that you need to know for your career. So basically what you're going to be doing, there's a script that is going to be testing for potential vulnerabilities on your target or targets. And this is the one that you need to know, right? When it comes to WP scan, the same concept. You have to know how WP scan works. I have a couple of videos, a tutorial on that. You have to know the different options to enumerate, check for vulnerabilities, so on and so forth. And what do I have here? I have nothing else. So let me come over to the preparation questions, and let's cover a couple of topics here. So the first question is a given: what is the primary goal of vulnerability analysis? And the option that makes sense right here is identifying, prioritizing system vulnerabilities, right? That's the only option that makes sense. When you identify a vulnerability, you're not exploiting it, you're not patching it, you're just identifying it, right? Identify and prioritize. That's the purpose of that. Which of the following tools is commonly used for vulnerability scanning? This is one of the questions based on the previous table that I had before. And the only available option here, or the only option that makes sense, is Nessus. You have to know this. You have to know what Nessus does, right? Even though we said previously that you can use Nmap to identify vulnerabilities, and yes, you can do that, but when you have Nessus and Nmap on that question, Nessus always going to be the proper answer to that question. What is a false positive in a vulnerability analysis? And that is a good concept. You have to know the differences between false positives and false negatives. So a false positive in a vulnerability occurs when a vulnerability is flagged but does not actually exist. So that is B. So a false positive is, okay, I found these vulnerabilities, but there's no vulnerability. It's either misconfiguration or it was misidentified. And that is very common, by the way. That's why you need to validate the vulnerabilities, and that's why it is a best practice to use multiple tools to validate the findings between one and the other. Okay, we're here. Which of these tools is open sourced and is used for vulnerability scanning as I have mentioned before, they all do vulnerability scanning. Nextpose, Qualys, Burp Suite, right, to an extent. But the only one that is considered open source is OpenVAS. Even though you have Qualys Communities Edition, Nextpose does not have community editions, and you have Burp Community Edition. But always remember that that's going to be OpenVAS. 5. What is the purpose of using CVSS in vulnerability analysis? And the purpose of the CVSS, and I created a video for vulnerabilities identification and scoring. So if you want to learn more about it, you can search for that video, but that is to rank vulnerabilities based on severity. Because when you check for vulnerabilities, the CVEs or the CVSS is going to determine the score of how likely that vulnerability is to be exploited, and it's going to give you a score depending on the scoring value that you are using, but usually is between 1 and 10, and 10 is the highest. So when you see a vulnerability that is rated as like 9.5, it means that it's really vulnerable. It means that there are known exploits out there. So that's something to keep in mind. If you see something that is a value of, like 6, 5, you may have to, accept the risk, whatever the risk is, so on and so forth. Which of the following scanners requires credentials for successful scanning? And this is what I was referring to before, that is authenticated. You can run authenticated and unauthenticated scans. What does a vulnerability scanner identify in a system? And the only option that makes sense here, to me at least, is known security weaknesses and misconfiguration. Vulnerability scanners are not going to identify encrypted traffic, even though it may see it. That's not the purpose of that. Which of the following is not a common vulnerability scanning tool? And this is good because, it looks familiar, right? Especially on the list that I showed you before. But Wireshark is a network capturing, network monitoring tool, not so much of a vulnerability assessment tool, and all of these are. What is the role of patch management in vulnerability analysis? And we have to scan for weakness password, and the option that makes sense right here is to ensure vulnerabilities are remediated through updates. Now, patch management in and of itself is a different set of processes and procedures that you follow to address vulnerabilities. And we'll talk about patch management in more details in the future. Maybe I'll create a video for that. If you're interested, let me know. But it's a process, it's not a technology. The process may use technology, but it's a process, and maybe the vulnerability management solution that you have provides patch management, but it has to be included. That's usually with commercial versions of that. Let's go to 10. Which of the following best describes a 0-day vulnerability? And that is a vulnerability exploited before it becomes known. And 0 days are very common, and 0 days are going to continue to happen. And the best way for you to prepare for that is to ensure that your entire security posture is solid, so that if a system is known for a 0-day vulnerability, you can create compensating controls around it. So, but you have to know what a 0-day is, right? And there's nothing you can do about it other than having compensating controls until it is properly fixed. What is the main advantage of performing regular vulnerability scans? And that is a best practice, by the way. And the option that makes sense is to identify and mitigate risks before exploitation. And when it comes to vulnerabilities management, again, that like running a scan is just running a scan, right? Like simple. What you do with that, how you address them, is the vulnerability management aspect of it. And the goal of that is to identify and mitigate risks before it is exploited, or to accept the risk, right? You don't have to mitigate it. You can just accept it, and that's part of vulnerability management. Which protocol is often analyzed during vulnerability scanning? And these are like, they're trying to throw you off right here. But, like 3 of them make sense, SNMP, FTP, and HTTP. If I have to choose this, I'm going to do HTTP, because that's always analyzed, but it could have been SNMP or even FTP. But, like they all make sense to me. I'm going to choose HTTP. What type of vulnerability does Nikto specializes in identifying? Again, Nikto is a web application scanning utility, and that's going to identify web servers vulnerabilities. Which of the following vulnerabilities would a credential scanners identify better than a non-credential scan? And that is B, misconfigured services and weak credentials, because you can do the rest with actually firewall rules. Does not make much sense here, so that's not even an option. Public-facing vulnerabilities, you don't need to be authenticated. Open ports, you don't need to be authenticated for that. So it's going to be misconfigurations. And the last questions, what is the purpose of performing a vulnerability assessment and to identify, evaluate, and prioritize vulnerabilities in a system? So this is what an overall of what you need to know for your exam when it comes to vulnerabilities management, vulnerabilities aspect of it. So I hope this information was useful to you, and I hope that you're getting value out of it. If you are, please leave it in the nice comment. Let me know how this is helping you, or maybe how this is not helping you. And if it's not helping you, maybe I can point you to other resources. There are many videos, tutorials, free resources. Also, if you are new to my channel, consider going through the different videos that I have. I have created multiple videos and tutorials on vulnerability management. I have used different tools for that. I believe it's going to be useful to you. And always remember that it's good to memorize tools for the exam, what they do, but it's better when you know how to use the tools. That's going to be much better. It's going to reinforce your learning. Thank you for watching again. And if you believe that this information is useful to somebody else, feel free to share that information. Consider subscribing to my channel, and why not leave a comment in the comment section. That helps with the algorithm. Thank you again, and I will talk to you on the next video.